Posted by New Adeptness 3296. A few days ago, I told my mother-in-law that I'd bring her grandkids, our gorgeous twins, 5 years old, to her house for dinner. It was a gesture of goodwill, as she and my father-in-law had babysat for an entire weekend while my husband and I took some time for ourselves. My mother-in-law decided to make that dinner a grand occasion and invited the entire family over. Fine with me, the more, the merrier. Except, half an hour after we arrived, Joanna walked in, with her entire back out, Lululemons exposed and all. Now, Joanna is my husband's ex-girlfriend, who also happens to be a favorite of my mother-in-law and a longtime friend of my husband's family. Long story short, Joanna did what she always does at these functions, touched my husband inappropriately, whispered in his ear, tried to eat off his plate, etc. She even went as far as trying to steal my seat next to him at the dinner table. Luckily, my sister-in-law, bless her, was able to stop her. My husband is generally good at putting his foot down. If she does anything truly egregious, he puts a stop to it, but to him, her touchy behavior, the way she hovers around him, and her attempts to get his attention don't fall into that category. I told myself to ignore her and not let her get to me, but later that evening, she pulled me aside and said absolutely horrible things. She told me it was only a matter of time before my husband left me, and that he was using me as a breeding machine, I am currently pregnant again, etc. At that point, I had had enough, so I dumped my drink on her and walked away. Joanna absolutely lost it and stormed out of the house. My husband's extended family generally has a good opinion of me, so no one thinks I did it on purpose. I did, and I do it again, but my husband knows better. He pulled me aside to confront me about it and was surprisingly angry. Did I make a bit of a scene? Sure, but his anger wasn't proportional to that at all. If you can't tell, my husband is the type of person who doesn't like to make a scene, especially around his family. I have complained about his closeness to Joanna multiple times before all this happened. I've asked him to cut contact with her and essentially just ignore her presence, but he's refused, claiming that she's a family friend. Basically, he thought I was overreacting every time I brought her up. But I'm tired of being the bigger person. Why should I have to watch her throw herself at him and just rise above it? No, that wench got what was coming to her, and my actions were long overdue. We argued back and forth about it for a while before I eventually revealed what she had said to me at the dinner. He understood my anger at that point, but I don't think it should have even gotten that far for him to understand why I don't want her around. The fact that he would trust the character of an ex over his wife of 10 plus years and the mother of his children is baffling and incredibly hurtful. I explained this to him, but he adamantly disagrees and makes excuses. So now, here we are. My husband thinks I should have brought up what she said from the beginning. To me, though, the issue isn't just what she said, it's her behavior as a whole. As a disclaimer, I know my husband is not cheating on me with this woman. We spend every waking second either together or with the kids. He wouldn't have time to. I also trust him completely. It just bothers me how comfortable and desperate that woman is. My mother-in-law loves her, and Joanna can do no wrong in her eyes, so I suppose that's where she gets her confidence. That aside, I don't understand why he allows her to come near him in the first place. Edit. No, I was not drinking while pregnant. I have not told my husband's family that I am pregnant yet, as we haven't passed the first trimester. My husband got me juice in a wine glass, but because no one knew, the assumption was that I threw wine. Edit. A few people have asked how taking the kids to dinner is a reward for my mother-in-law. She had been asking us to come over for dinner for a while and is always looking for an excuse to see our kids. We don't live very close anymore, so in-person visits are rare these days. She also really enjoys cooking for everyone and used to do weekly dinners when my husband and I still lived nearby. My husband's family is Italian, if that gives you any idea. Update 1 month 3 weeks later. I ended up showing my husband the comments and PMs I got from my post a couple of days later, which were largely against him. I didn't expect it to change his opinion much, and it didn't. In fact, it made the situation worse. He didn't appreciate the overwhelming number of comments suggesting that he liked the attention, and he thought I had embellished details about Joanna's behavior in the post. I didn't, and in many cases, I actually downplayed just how crazy some of her actions are. I asked him if his mom even liked me, and he didn't respond to the question. He just looked at me, and we sat in silence for a full effing minute. Many people on my previous post said I was crazy if I thought my mother-in-law would invite my husband's ex to dinner with his wife and kids there, as a show of respect and goodwill. Call me crazy, but I bought into the whole she's a family friend excuse and continually let it slide. I cried nonstop for days after our conversation. Maybe I'm an idiot and should have seen the signs, but I genuinely thought my mother-in-law and I had a decent relationship, especially now that I have the twins. There were some issues early on in my husband's and my relationship that caused some discord, but I thought we had moved past it all. Clearly, we haven't. I think it's much more likely that she loves her grandkids and just tolerates the vessel that produced them. My husband and I were at something of an impasse for a week afterward. I'm naturally very loving, but I've just about had it with this situation, so I was irritable, quiet, a complete 180 from my usual self. We talked again, and he said he'd try to be more assertive with Joanna. I told him there'd be no need, as I had no plans to go to his mother's house anymore. Me not going means the twins can't either, since he can't very well be expected to entertain his family and look after the children he helped create. Note the sarcasm. That actually works in my favor, since my mother-in-law loves the twins, and he apparently can't stand to disappoint her. So, the impasse continued. I've had a few complications with my pregnancy since then. Baby and I are okay, nothing too worrisome, and there have been so many other things happening in our lives that the frigid air between us has slowly started to melt. We haven't resolved the situation at all, just glossed over it in favor of more pressing matters. I really do need him right now, and I'm not necessarily upset that things are starting to go back to normal. I just know it's going to come up again the next time his mom throws an event. I'll convince myself that this time around will be fine. And it won't, because it never is. But I'm unsure how to bring the issue up again without seeming like I'm dragging up the past. It truly drives me crazy, even more so now that I realize my mother-in-law's kindness isn't entirely genuine. Is there any advice on bringing this up carefully? On resolving this issue once and for all? I'm at my wit's end because I adore this man in every other aspect, but I can't keep putting up with this. Second update 1 day later. My husband and I met in college. At the time, he and his on-again off-again ex had broken up, so I asked him out. If I'd known back then what I know now, I'm not sure I would have bothered. 2 years into our relationship, I still hadn't met his parents. He hadn't met mine because my family is a disaster, an entirely different story, but from what I could tell, his parents seemed fine. When I asked why I hadn't met them, he joked that his mom didn't like me because of his ex. I can't recall his exact words, but that was the general idea. Anyway, I treated it like a joke because he did. As time went on, it felt less and less like a joke and more like the startling truth. I finally got to meet my mother-in-law and father-in-law a few months later, and the welcome was, well, underwhelming, to say the least. But I figured it was just me having weird expectations. His family's Italian, so I'd done a little, crappy, research on what to expect, in addition to asking him about his family. I thought they'd be a bit warmer, but they weren't downright rude to me, so it was still a win in my book. As time passed, I tried to warm up to my mother-in-law, but nothing worked. Her indifference slowly turned into thinly veiled disdain. For one of my father-in-law's birthdays, I got him a handmade, expensive as hell. I still think about that goddamn wallet. It enrages me, Italian leather wallet, with my husband's, boyfriend at the time, approval. Turns out Italians have a superstition against gifting empty wallets, which made the gift a bit awkward. But my father-in-law didn't make a big deal and even gave me a coin to turn it into a purchase instead of a gift. We laughed, and I thought things were fine, until I found the wallet tucked away in my husband's apartment a month later. I found out from him that my mother-in-law apparently said she got my father-in-law a better one, so mine wasn't needed anymore. When that happened and why no one bothered to tell me, I don't know. Oh, and my father-in-law fell ill shortly afterward, which I'm pretty sure she blamed on me too. My mother-in-law speaks fluent English, but for the first couple of months of knowing her, I was led to believe she only spoke Italian because that's all she would speak around me. Granted, I could have asked my husband about her level of English, but it didn't occur to me. I assumed that if someone could speak English, they'd use it around people who didn't speak their native language. Imagine my shock when I heard her speak fluent English for the first time, not to me, I can't remember the context, but still, WTF? And don't get me started on wedding planning. It was an absolute nightmare. My mother-in-law nitpicked everything. We had a smaller budget, largely due to me, and she made sure I felt lesser because of it. She had mentioned wanting to be involved, and since she and my father-in-law were footing most of the costs, I said yes. My bridesmaids helped deal with her, but eventually, I cut her out of the planning entirely because having her around was starting to suck the life out of me. She also made a big deal about my parents not attending or paying for a portion of the wedding. My family and I were completely estranged at the time, and she didn't seem to like that either. She'd rant in Italian, and while I didn't understand much, I knew she was bad-talking me. Oh, and she's a classic mama's boy enabler. They infantilized my husband growing up, and there was a time when we couldn't even buy groceries without her input. He's her golden boy. I've heard her refer to him as her miracle child. She hasn't had any difficulty conceiving that I know of, but he's the only boy she gave birth to. When friction would arise between my mother-in-law and me, he tried to keep the peace but often still took her side in many situations. He only stood firm when she insulted my upbringing or tried to make me feel unworthy of marrying him. Both things I appreciated immensely, because those are sore subjects, but I wish he'd done more at times. He isn't blameless in this either, but this post isn't really about him. Suffice it to say, I have many stories about how awful and cold my mother-in-law used to be toward me. But then I got pregnant, and her attitude did a complete 180. Suddenly, she was offering to babysit, cook meals, knit clothes, etc. She even kissed me on both cheeks when she came to see us after I gave birth. This woman had never voluntarily touched me before that point, I don't think. We started cooking together, and she taught me family recipes and some niche Italian phrases commonly used in the village their family is from. Dare I say, we bonded. I thought we'd finally gotten past whatever the initial problem was. Maybe having kids with her son was enough to prove that I was here to stay, so she decided to warm up to me. I don't know. I had no close maternal figures in my life, no contact with my narcissistic mom since college and hardly any contact with my grandmothers, so this felt incredibly cathartic. I wasn't rushing to tell her my secrets or confide in her, but the idea that we might be able to build up to that point made me happy. I had postpartum depression after the twins, and having my mother-in-law around to help was a godsend. I was hesitant at first, but she proved herself to be incredibly trustworthy, and my husband and I were absolutely exhausted. I love my gorgeous girls, but having 2 kids at once made me the crankiest I've ever been. My stress levels were through the roof between feeding, nursing, changing, burping, soothing, etc. My husband was equally exhausted, and just when we felt hopeless, my mother-in-law would offer to come over, let us sleep, eat, go out, just do whatever we needed to recharge. We would talk, usually about the kids, but I just felt excited that she wanted to hold a conversation with me. In the past, she hadn't bothered. If she called, it was on her son's phone, and they'd speak, and then she'd hang up. But suddenly, she was asking to speak to me as well. There was something extremely validating about it all, and I was happy to put the past behind us in favor of this new change. But recently, through a situation that is related but not the focus of this post, I realized she never respected me or my relationship with her son. For the past decade, my mother-in-law has been inviting my husband's ex to family gatherings and turning a blind eye to her blatant advances on him. She was introduced as a family friend, so I thought nothing of it initially. Plus, as my relationship with my mother-in-law improved, I assumed any malice she had shown toward me would naturally fade. She had been inviting my husband's ex to family events before I gave birth and continued to do so well after. I don't know why, but I made the dumb assumption that because it continued, it couldn't have been in bad taste. We had gotten past our bad blood, after all, so if she was still inviting my husband's ex, it couldn't have been with bad intent. Or so went my idiotic logic. But after posting about my situation, I realized how horribly naive I was about everything. Then, a few weeks ago, I came across a post from a man disparaging his mom for treating her daughter-in-law like crap, only to switch up when she gave birth to her grandchildren. And then it clicked. That is exactly what happened to me. My mother-in-law's kindness may never have been genuine toward me. Rather, her love for her grandchildren outweighed any disdain she had for me. She wasn't warming up to me at all, she was just tolerating my presence to have access to my kids. Reddit really is an eye-opening place. Needless to say, I feel absolutely crushed. Everything else aside, I truly thought my mother-in-law was in my corner. The past 5 years felt so healing because of our relationship. I've never had a sustained, genuine relationship with an older woman before this, and finding out it was all fake is numbing in ways I can't explain. I feel so freaking stupid, which is saying quite a bit, considering I didn't think it was possible to feel like more of an idiot than I already do right now. I just wonder how starved for attention I must have been to miss such clear signs. Grieving a relationship that only existed on my end is freaking hard, and coming to terms with my own lack of awareness and disillusionment has been a battle, one of several that I just feel like I'm losing. I feel a bit pathetic, all things considered. How did I not realize? Now all these thoughts flood my mind about what she's been telling my children when she's with them and whether or not the extended family is in on it as well. I've been a mess. God, I feel sick. There are certainly many layers to this situation, but this one hurts much more than I thought it would. I'm going to stop here because I've already written plenty, but I am more than going through it.